Welcome back to LPBW Update, your number one source for the deepest insights and breaking theories surrounding Little People, Big World. For years, fans have watched the complex dynamic between Amy Roloff, Matt Roloff, and his partner Caryn Chandler play out on their television screens. We've seen the tension, the awkward handoffs at the farm, and the emotional toll of a family navigating a new chapter. But what if the narrative we've been shown isn't the whole truth? What if the story of a bitter ex-wife and a patient new partner is not a reflection of reality, but a carefully constructed fiction? We have been following a series of insider reports and exclusive theories that point to a shocking possibility: a deliberate, high-tech campaign of media manipulation orchestrated from within, designed to systematically rewrite the Roloff family history. The target? Amy Roloff. The alleged architect? Caryn Chandler. Before we dive deep into this explosive investigation, if you believe in getting to the bottom of what's really happening behind the scenes, take a moment to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to LPBW Update and ring that notification bell, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of where this story goes. The details we are about to uncover could change the way you see the show forever. Let's begin by establishing the public-facing narrative, the one meticulously crafted and broadcast for millions of viewers season after season. Following the painful and public divorce of Matt and Amy Roloff, the family structure was irrevocably altered. A central figure in this new chapter was Caryn Chandler. Having worked as the farm manager for years, her transition into the role of Matt's partner was a storyline fraught with inherent drama. The show's producers naturally focused on this tension. The resulting portrayal has been remarkably consistent. Amy Roloff is often edited to appear hesitant, resistant to change, and at times openly bitter about Caryn's presence in a life and on a property she helped build. Her sides are amplified, her moments of frustration are highlighted, and her conversations are often framed as confrontational or difficult. She is, in the televised version of events, the obstacle to a harmonious, blended family future. In stark contrast, Caryn Chandler is consistently portrayed as the stabilizing force. She is the calm, patient, and understanding partner, navigating the choppy waters of Matt's family dynamics with grace. She is often shown offering logical solutions, extending olive branches, and patiently waiting for Amy to come around. This dichotomy is the engine of the show's primary conflict: Amy, the emotional anchor to the past, versus Caryn, the pragmatic guide to the future. For the casual viewer, this narrative is simple, compelling, and easy to follow. It provides clear heroes and antagonists depending on your perspective and fuels endless online debate. But for those paying closer attention, and according to sources who have been close to the production for years, this black and white portrayal has always felt incomplete. It lacks the nuance and complexity of real human relationships. It's too clean, too simple. It's a story. And now we have reason to believe it is a story that was not just captured by cameras, but actively and deceptively written in the editing bay. The core of this theory, based on a series of reports from production insiders, revolves around a calculated and cultivated alliance. Reality television production is a high-pressure environment, filled with young, ambitious crew members eager to climb the ladder. Editors, in particular, hold immense power. They are the unseen storytellers, the ones who sift through hundreds of hours of raw footage to find the moments that will define a character for an entire season. Our sources allege that Caryn Chandler, with her years of experience as the farm manager, understood the inner workings of the production better than almost anyone. She knew who did what, who held the power, and more importantly, who was hungry for a chance to prove themselves. It was here, within the complex machinery of the show's post-production, that she allegedly found her key collaborator, a junior editor. We will protect their identity, but sources describe this individual as young, talented, and deeply ambitious, perhaps feeling overlooked by senior staff and eager to make a significant creative contribution. Caryn, it is said, began to cultivate a friendship with this editor. It didn't start with a direct request to manipulate footage. It was far more subtle, a masterclass in social engineering. It began with casual conversations, offering what she called exclusive inside information. She positioned herself as a confidant, a guide who could help the editor understand the real story behind the footage they were seeing. You have to understand, she might say, the cameras don't capture everything. The tension you see between me and Amy, it's actually 10 times worse in person. I want to help you make the show as authentic as possible. This approach was brilliant in its deception. She wasn't asking the editor to create fiction. She was framing her request as a mission to reveal a deeper truth. The young editor, feeling special and entrusted with privileged information from a main cast member, would have felt empowered. They weren't just an editor anymore. They were an insider, a co-conspirator in the pursuit of authenticity. The relationship deepened through text messages and quiet phone calls. Caryn would allegedly offer praise for recent episodes, telling the editor, "You really captured the dynamic perfectly in that last scene. You have a real talent for seeing the truth." This positive reinforcement built a bond of trust and loyalty. The editor, now feeling like a value partner, became more receptive to suggestions. And then the suggestions began. They were small at first, couched in the language of creative collaboration. You know, that little sigh Amy did when she was looking at the invoices earlier today? Caryn might suggest a text. "It was about 2 hours before I arrived for the pumpkin season meeting, but if you were to place that sigh right after I walk in and say hello to her, it would really underscore the unspoken tension everyone is always talking about. It would just give the scene that extra layer of realism." This is a classic editing manipulation technique. A reaction is decontextualized and repurposed to create an entirely new meaning. To the viewer, it appears that Amy is sighing in frustration at the mere sight of Caryn. In reality, her sigh could have been about anything: a boring task, a long day, or a misplaced document. But in the final cut, it becomes a weapon, painting Amy as perpetually annoyed and unwelcoming. This was allegedly just the beginning. The suggestions grew more brazen as the alliance solidified. Our sources detail a pattern of specific, deceptive editing tactics allegedly proposed by Caryn and executed by her confidant in the edit bay. Conversations were spliced together. Amy might have a two-part thought in a confessional: "It's difficult letting go of the farm. It holds so many memories, but I know it's the right thing for my future." The manipulated edit would only use the first part, "It's difficult letting go of the farm," and cut it right after a scene of Matt and Caryn happily planning their new house. The context is stripped away, and Amy is portrayed as someone unable to move on, stuck in the past, while everyone else is building a future. Another powerful tool was the use of reaction shots. The crew films constantly, capturing thousands of fleeting expressions. A moment where Amy looks sad or thoughtful during a quiet moment of reflection could be lifted and inserted into the middle of a happy family celebration. The final edit would show the whole family laughing, then cut to a close-up of a somber-looking Amy, implying she is miserable and unable to share in the family's joy. In reality, that shot could have been captured hours earlier when she was thinking about something completely unrelated. This technique effectively manufactures drama and paints a false emotional picture. Unflattering takes were also allegedly selected with purpose. In any given scene, a person is filmed for a long time. There will be moments where they look great and moments where they're caught mid-sentence, blinking awkwardly, or with a less than perfect expression. The theory suggests that Caryn would guide the editor to consistently choose the most unflattering takes of Amy, making her appear flustered, angry, or unstable, while meticulously ensuring that her own footage was selected from the most composed and flattering angles. This subtle, visual manipulation works on a subconscious level, shaping the audience's perception of each woman's character and stability. The result of this alleged campaign was a slow but steady poisoning of the well. Episode by episode, a false narrative was being built, brick by brick, using fragments of truth twisted into a weapon of character assassination. Amy Roloff was being systematically reframed, not by reality, but by a meticulously manipulated version of it. For Amy, the experience of watching her own life play back on television became a disorienting psychological ordeal. Imagine the feeling. You lived through a moment, you know how you felt, you know what was said. Then, months later, you watch a version of that moment on national television, and it's wrong. The edits were so clever, so subtle, that they created a powerful form of gaslighting. Amy would see herself reacting angrily to a comment she knows was never made to her, or looking despondent during what she remembered as a perfectly happy family barbecue. The show would present these manufactured moments as fact, and millions of people would accept them as such. This, according to our sources, led to a profound sense of confusion and self-doubt. She would start to question her own memories. Did I say that? Maybe I was more upset than I remember. Am I the one who is misremembering things? It's a deeply unsettling experience to have your reality questioned by a version of yourself that is being broadcast to the world. It's isolating. If she were to complain, how would it sound? The show edited me to look bad. It's a common refrain from reality stars, one that is often dismissed as sour grapes or an inability to take responsibility for one's own actions. She would risk looking paranoid and even more unstable, thereby proving the manipulated narrative correct. The one person who became her anchor to reality, our reports indicate, was her husband, Chris Marek. Having come into the family dynamic later, Chris had no long-standing baggage or preconceived notions shaped by years of filming. He had a clear outsider's perspective. He would watch these episodes with Amy and be the one to validate her feelings. "No, Amy, that's not what happened," he would insist. "I was standing right there. That conversation you had with Matt was about the budget for the new fence." They cut it together with Caryn's confessional about wedding planning to make it look like you were fighting about her. This is wrong. Chris's insistence was crucial. It kept Amy from completely succumbing to the gaslighting, reinforcing that her memory was accurate and that something was deeply amiss with the show's portrayal of events. Let's construct a specific, hypothetical example based on the patterns insiders have described. Picture a scene at Roloff Farms during a busy pumpkin season planning meeting. The family is gathered around a table. Caryn, in her capacity as an experienced manager, makes a perfectly reasonable suggestion about staffing. "Maybe we should have 2 people on the ticket counter during peak hours on Saturday," she says. In the raw footage, Amy nods in agreement and says, "That's a good idea." A few hours earlier, during a completely separate moment, Amy was reviewing some complicated financial spreadsheets for her own business. The numbers weren't adding up, and in a moment of frustration, she rolled her eyes and sighed. The camera, always rolling, captured this. Now, enter the manipulative edit. In the final version of the show, we see Caryn say, "Maybe we should have 2 people on the ticket counter." The very next shot is a tight close-up of Amy, rolling her eyes and sighing with frustration. The shot taken from hours earlier. The audio of her agreeing is completely removed. Then the show cuts to a confessional from Amy, recorded a week later. In this confessional, she was asked about the general stress of selling the north side of the farm. She says, it's really hard sometimes. There are so many emotions involved." The edit splices this vague, out-of-context quote immediately after the eye roll. The result? A completely fabricated narrative. The viewer is led to believe that Caryn made a helpful suggestion, and Amy's immediate reaction was to roll her eyes in bitterness and then complain in a confessional about how hard it is to work with her. She is portrayed as petty, obstructionist, and jealous. The truth of the moment, that she actually agreed with the idea, is erased. This is the level of insidious, detailed manipulation that sources allege was taking place, turning everyday moments into weapons against Amy's public reputation. For a long time, this pattern allegedly went unnoticed by the highest levels of the production. The show is a massive operation with multiple editors, producers, and network executives involved. A junior editor's specific cuts, especially if they are skillfully done, can easily fly under the radar. The changes are incremental, a slow boil rather than a sudden explosion. However, a lie, especially one this elaborate, can only be sustained for so long. The red flags, subtle at first, began to accumulate. The turning point, according to our reports, came when a senior producer sat down to review a near-final cut of an upcoming pivotal episode. This producer, let's call him Mark, is described as an industry veteran, someone who had been with Little People, Big World since its early days. He had a deep, long-standing respect for the Roloff family and felt a professional obligation to portray their story with a degree of integrity, even within the constructed confines of reality TV. As he watched the episode, something felt fundamentally wrong. The narrative was heavy-handed, lacking the subtlety and authenticity that had made the show a success. Amy was portrayed as almost a caricature of a bitter ex-wife, while Caryn was depicted with a halo of saintly patience. Every scene seemed engineered to push this single, simplistic narrative. A specific sequence, even more blatant than usual, caught his attention. It involved a family decision where Amy's valid concerns were edited to sound like irrational complaints, immediately contrasted with Caryn offering the exact same opinion, which was then framed as the voice of reason. The manipulation was so transparent that it felt like propaganda. This veteran producer's instincts told him this wasn't just standard reality TV editing for drama. This was a targeted character assassination. His suspicion peaked. He decided to do something that is rarely done without a major cause. He launched a quiet, internal investigation into the episode's edit history. He went directly to Avid, the professional editing software system used by the production. He pulled up the master project file for the episode and began to examine the digital paper trail, the edit logs. For those unfamiliar, an edit log is like a digital record of every single action taken. It shows who made what cut, when they made it, what clips they used, and what previous versions of the sequence look like. As he delved into the logs, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. He noticed that many of the most damaging and imbalanced edits targeting Amy were consistently being made by one specific junior editor. Furthermore, he saw that these changes were often made late in the editing process, sometimes overriding more balanced and nuanced cuts that had been made by more senior editors earlier in the week. It was a clear pattern of one individual systematically pushing a specific, skewed agenda. The producer's heart sank. This was no longer just a feeling or a suspicion. This was evidence. The pattern was too consistent, too targeted to be a coincidence. He realized he might be on the verge of uncovering a massive breach of production ethics, a deliberate manipulation that went far beyond the accepted norms of the genre. The next logical and terrifying step was to pull the raw, unedited footage. He needed to see what really happened, to compare the unvarnished truth captured by the cameras with the polished fiction that was about to be broadcast. He sent a request to the archives for the raw media from several key scenes over the past season. his mind racing with the potential implications of what he was about to uncover. He was now on a path that could expose a deeply rooted deception and potentially detonate a bomb within the production and the Roloff family itself. The truth was waiting in those raw files, and he was about to press play. When we left off, the senior producer, a man we're calling Mark, was on the precipice of a discovery that would shake the foundations of Little People, Big World. He had noticed a disturbing pattern, a narrative that felt less like observed reality and more like a targeted campaign. With a growing sense of dread, he had requested the raw, unedited footage from key scenes that had recently been filmed. He was now sitting in a darkened edit bay, alone, the glow of the monitors reflecting in his glasses. The fate of the show's integrity and a family's public image rested on what he was about to see. He queued up the first file, the raw footage from the pumpkin season planning meeting, the very scene that had first triggered his alarm bells. The raw footage began to play. The audio was clear, picking up the ambient sounds of the farm office. Matt, Amy, Caryn, and Zach were present. The camera work was a bit shaky, as raw footage often is, capturing wide shots in unpolished moments. He saw the conversation unfold in real time. He watched Caryn make her suggestion about staffing the ticket counter. It was a practical, logical point. And then he saw Amy's reaction, clear as day. She nodded, looked at Caryn, and said, "That's a good idea. We were stretched thin last year." She then added a constructive thought of her own about where to position the staff. It was a moment of collaboration, a normal, slightly boring business interaction. There was no tension, no drama. It was a functional family working through a problem. The producer paused the footage, a knot tightening in his stomach. He already knew what the edited version looked like, but he needed to see them back to back. He opened the final broadcast cut of the scene. The contrast was breathtakingly sinister. The scene started the same, Caryn's suggestion, but what followed was a masterstroke of deceit. The editor had cut away from the wide shot the moment the words left Caryn's mouth. They had inserted the tight close-up of Amy, the one captured hours earlier when she was struggling with spreadsheets. Her eyes rolled in what looked like pure exasperation. A frustrated sigh was audible on her audio track. Amy's actual agreeable response was completely gone, left on the digital cutting room floor. In its place, this manufactured moment of contempt. To make it even more damning, it was followed by the out-of-context confessional where she spoke of things being hard, framing her supposed frustration as a direct response to Caryn. Watching the two versions side by side was like seeing a magic trick revealed. The illusion was shattered, and what remained was the cold, ugly mechanics of the deception. It wasn't just misleading, it was a fabrication, a lie constructed from truthful fragments. He moved on to the next scene, a family barbecue at Chris and Amy's house. The edited version had painted a somber picture. It focused on Amy looking distant, cutting to her thoughtful expressions while everyone else laughed, all set to a melancholy underscore. It created the distinct impression that she was unhappy, an outsider at her own party, unable to cope with her new life. The raw footage told a completely different story. For over an hour, Amy was the life of the party. The cameras had captured her laughing hysterically at a story Chris was telling, playing with the grandchildren, and engaging in a warm, friendly conversation with Matt. The sad and thoughtful looks that had been used so effectively in the final cut were fleeting, momentary pauses in a long and joyful afternoon. They were moments of reflection that anyone has during a busy event. By isolating these moments and stripping them of their context, the editor had inverted reality. They had turned a scene of joy and family connection into one of alienation and sadness, all to serve the ongoing narrative of Amy's bitterness. The producer felt a wave of professional shame. This was happening under his watch. He pulled up a third scene, one of the most contentious of the season, a negotiation between Matt and Amy about the final buyout price for her share of the farm. The broadcast version was a showcase of Matt's patience and Amy's perceived emotional obstinance. Matt was shown making a clear, fair offer, while Amy was edited to appear flustered, confused by the numbers, and emotionally resistant to the process. The raw footage was a revelation. The negotiation was a 2-hour marathon. Amy came to the table prepared with her own set of documents and logical, well-articulated counter-arguments. She pointed out discrepancies in the valuations, asked sharp questions about property taxes, and calmly held her ground on points of principle. Matt, in the unedited version, was the one who at times became flustered, struggling to answer some of her more detailed financial questions. The final cut had meticulously removed every single one of Amy's competent, logical arguments. It had excised every moment of Matt's uncertainty. All that was left were her moments of emotional fatigue, the sighs, the moments of rubbing her temples, and Matt's most composed and articulate statements. They had transformed a complex negotiation between two business partners into a simplistic drama of a patient man dealing with his hysterical ex-wife. The pattern was no longer a suspicion. It was a clear, undeniable, and systematic campaign of disinformation. Every decision, every cut, every choice of music and reaction shot was designed to elevate Caryn and diminish Amy. The producer sat back in his chair, the hum of the servers filling the silence. The evidence from the footage was damning, but it still only proved what had happened, not why. He knew that to truly understand the scope of this and to have an airtight case, he needed more. He needed to prove intent. He needed to find the smoking gun. His mind raced. How could a junior editor be so invested in this specific narrative? It had to be coming from somewhere. The relationship that others on the crew had casually mentioned, the friendship between the editor and Caryn Chandler, now seemed deeply ominous. The producer knew he was stepping into dangerous territory, a move that could have serious legal and career repercussions, but his conscience wouldn't let him back down. He made a call to the head of production IT, citing a serious breach of company policy and a potential compromise of the show's integrity. He requested access to the company-issued communication logs for the junior editor in question. It was a high-level request that required executive sign-off, but the producer's reputation and seniority carried weight. He explained the gravity of the situation without naming names, simply stating that he had evidence of production tampering that threatened the company. Within a few hours, the permission was granted. A secure file containing months of text message logs from the editor's company phone was delivered to his encrypted drive. With a deep breath, he opened the file. He scrolled through countless messages, mundane work conversations, scheduling notes, and lunch orders. Then he found it, a message thread with a contact simply listed as C. Chandler. The initial messages were friendly and innocuous, filled with praise and casual chit-chat. "You did a fantastic job on last week's episode," Caryn had written. "You really know how to find the heart of the story." The editor's replies were enthusiastic, clearly flattered by the attention from a principal cast member. But as he scrolled further, the tone began to shift. The suggestions started cleverly disguised as helpful insider tips. Then he saw it. A text from Caryn that corresponded directly with the pumpkin season meeting scene he had just reviewed. The message read, "Hey, just watching the dailies from today. That heavy sigh Amy did around 2 p.m. in the office when she was doing her books would be perfect to use right after I walk in and say hi at the meeting. It will really help sell the unspoken tension the network loves so much, LOL. You are the best at this." The producer felt a chill run down his spine. The winking emoji, the casual LOL, it was all there. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a direct, explicit instruction to manipulate footage for a specific malicious purpose. He kept scrolling, his horror growing with each message. Another text chain discussed the family barbecue. For the party scene, Caryn had written, let's make sure to focus on Amy when she's not talking to anyone. There were a few moments she was just sitting there quietly. If we use those shots and some sad music, it will really highlight how she's struggling to fit in with Chris's family and our family all together. Let's really lean into that storyline this week. You get what I'm saying. It was a blueprint for the exact deception he had uncovered in the raw footage. Then came the messages about the farm negotiation. RE, the business meeting, the text from Caryn read. That part where she gets frustrated with all the paperwork is gold. If you cut right from Matt's calm proposal to her getting all flustered with the papers, it makes him look like the patient, reasonable one, and she just looks emotional. Let's make sure that's the main takeaway for the audience. Thanks for being my secret weapon. Secret weapon. The words hung in the air of the silent edit bay. This was the smoking gun. It was undeniable, premeditated, and cruel. It was a conspiracy between a cast member and a crew member to systematically destroy the public reputation of another cast member, the mother of the family, for personal gain. He now held the proof of a high-tech psychological campaign in his hands. He knew this couldn't be handled internally by just firing the editor. The rot was too deep. It involved the central figures of the show. The only people who had a right to see this, the only people who could decide what happened next, were Matt and Amy Roloff. The next day, the producer called for an emergency meeting. He didn't give a reason, only that it was urgent and required both Matt and Amy to be present together at the main production offices in Portland. The request was unusual, and it immediately put both of them on edge. They arrived separately, the air thick with apprehension. They were led not to a comfortable lounge, but to a sterile corporate conference room. The senior producer, Mark, was waiting for them, his face grim. A large television monitor was set up at the head of the table. Matt, Amy, thank you for coming, he began, his voice heavy. I'm not going to waste your time. We've uncovered a serious issue, a profound breach of trust that goes to the very heart of the show and to the heart of your family. Matt and Amy exchanged a nervous glance. Matt, ever the pragmatist, likely assumed it was a contractual dispute or a budget issue. Amy, having lived through the psychological torment of the past seasons, probably feared something far more personal. The producer picked up a remote. I'm going to show you 2 versions of a scene from the upcoming episode, he said, his eyes on Amy. First, this is the raw, unedited footage of the pumpkin season planning meeting. He pressed play. The scene unfolded on the large screen just as he had seen it the night before. The normal, collaborative, and drama-free business discussion. He watched Amy's face as she saw herself nodding in agreement with Caryn, a moment that had been stolen from her. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Now, the producer said grimly, this is the version that was set to air. He played the final cut. The moment Caryn spoke, the edit jumped to the out-of-context eye roll and sigh. Amy let out an audible gasp. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. It was the validation of 1,000 doubts, the confirmation of a nightmare she had been unable to prove. I knew it, she whispered, her voice trembling. I knew that's not what happened. Matt looked stunned. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mark, come on, he said, a defensive edge to his voice. You guys edit things for drama all the time. That's just reality TV. The producer held up a hand. Keep watching, Matt, he said softly. He then played the side-by-side comparison of the family barbecue. He showed the raw footage of Amy laughing and engaging, followed by the broadcast cut of her looking isolated and miserable. Amy began to cry quietly, a mixture of vindication and profound sadness. Chris had been right all along. She wasn't crazy. Matt's defensive posture began to crumble. He was watching a blatant rewriting of his family's reality. He saw his ex-wife, the mother of his children, being painted as a miserable recluse during a happy family event. The producer didn't stop. He moved to the final, most damning example, the farm negotiation. He showed the 2-hour marathon of Amy's competent, intelligent arguments, followed by the edited travesty that portrayed her as an emotional wreck. By this point, Matt was silent. The color had drained from his face. The easy explanation of "it's just TV editing" no longer held any water. This wasn't just editing for drama. This was a meticulous, character-by-character dismantling of Amy's credibility. He was witnessing the anatomy of a smear campaign. "I don't understand," Matt finally said, his voice low. "Who would do this? Why?" The producer looked at him, his expression one of deep professional regret. "That is the most difficult part of this conversation," he said. He picked up the remote again, but this time he didn't cue up a video. Instead, he switched the input to his laptop and a new image filled the screen. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation. The producer stood up and began to read the messages aloud, his voice echoing in the silent room. He read Caryn's words about the pumpkin season meeting. That heavy sigh Amy did would be perfect. It will really help sell the unspoken tension the network loves so much, lol. He read the instructions for the barbecue. Focus on Amy when she's not talking to anyone. Use some sad music, really lean into that storyline. And then he read the final devastating text about the negotiation. Her getting all flustered with the papers makes him look like the patient, reasonable one. "Thanks for being my secret weapon." Matt stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He saw the words, the casual cruelty, the winking emoji. This wasn't an anonymous editor's decision. This was a directive. It was a conspiracy orchestrated by his partner, the woman he loved and defended, the woman he was building his future with. The entire narrative he had come to believe of Amy's bitterness and Caryn's stabilizing grace was revealed as a lie. It wasn't just a lie told to the public. It was a lie he had been told, a lie he had lived. He was confronted with the undeniable black and white proof of a high-tech psychological campaign designed to systematically destroy his ex-wife's public reputation, rewrite their shared family history, and manipulate him, all for her own benefit. Every argument, every moment of tension, every time he had defended Caryn against Amy's suspicions, it was all cast in a new, sickening light. Amy sat across from him, tears streaming down her face, no longer looking at the screen, but at her ex-husband, waiting. The producer had laid the truth bare. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of a family's history being irrevocably fractured. Matt's world had been turned upside down, and in that sterile conference room, under the cold fluorescent lights, he had to confront the wreckage. The silence in that conference room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. It was broken only by Amy's quiet, ragged breaths as she tried to compose herself. For Matt, it was the sound of his world cracking down the middle. Every memory of the past few years, every argument where he had defended Caryn, every instance where he had dismissed Amy's feelings as bitterness or an inability to move on, was now being violently recontextualized. He wasn't just a bystander. He had been an unwitting accomplice, a pawn in a game he didn't even know was being played. The producer, Mark, remained standing, allowing the weight of the revelation to fully land. He had done his part. The rest was up to them. Matt slowly lifted his head, his eyes avoiding the damning evidence on the screen. He looked at Amy, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. He didn't see the difficult ex-wife from the television show. He saw the mother of his 4 children, a woman he had shared 30 years of his life with, who had been subjected to a relentless and invisible form of psychological warfare, and he had let it happen. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely a whisper. "Amy, He trailed off, the words failing him. What could he say? He swallowed hard, his face etched with a pain that went beyond anger into a place of profound shame. I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I should have seen it. Amy looked back at him, tears still tracing paths down her cheeks, but her expression wasn't one of triumph or, I told you so. It was one of deep, soul-crushing sadness. This wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy laid bare. I just wanted you to see the truth, Matt, she said, her voice stronger now. I started to think I was going crazy. I just wanted you to know what was really happening. The producer cleared his throat, bringing them back to the cold reality of the situation. From a production standpoint, he said, his tone all business now, the junior editor has been suspended pending termination. We are conducting a full audit of every episode they've touched. As for Caryn's involvement, that is a far more complex issue that will have to be addressed at the highest levels with the network. But first, you two needed to know the truth. The meeting was over. There was nothing more to be said in that room. The drive back to the farm must have been the longest of Matt Roloff's life. Every familiar landmark, every turn in the road would have looked alien. He was driving back to a home that no longer felt like his own, to a life built on a foundation of lies. The woman waiting for him was not the person he thought she was. She was a master storyteller, a strategist who had used the most powerful tool at their disposal, the television show that chronicled their lives, to rewrite their history in her favor. He replayed the text messages in his head, the casual cruelty, the LOL, the winking emoji. It wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated long-term strategy. It was a campaign to isolate Amy, to discredit her in the eyes of the public, and, most painfully, in his eyes. And it worked. He arrived at the house he had so proudly designed, the dream home he was building with Caryn. According to our insider sources, she greeted him at the door, cheerful and oblivious, asking how the mysterious meeting went. Matt's response was cold and quiet. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. The betrayal was too deep for that. He simply walked past her into the living room. Caryn, we need to talk, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. She followed him, a confused look on her face, the cheerful facade beginning to crack at the sight of his grim expression. He didn't present it as an accusation. He presented it as a fact. He took out his phone, where the producer had forwarded the screenshots of the text messages. He held it out for her to see. I saw this today, he said. Caryn's eyes scanned the screen. The color drained from her face. The first instinct of a manipulator caught is rarely confession. It is deflection and justification. Matt, wait, she allegedly stammered. You don't understand. It's not what it looks like. The editors are always looking for drama. I was just helping them. I was trying to show them the real tension that was already there. I was protecting us, protecting our story from all the negativity. But the spell was broken. Matt had seen the raw footage. He knew there was no real tension to show in those moments. The tension hadn't been captured. It had been created. It had been manufactured. You weren't protecting our story, Caryn, he replied, his voice still low, but now laced with a cold fury. You wrote a fictional one, and you made my ex-wife its villain. You used her real pain and our family's struggles to create a narrative that made you look like a saint. You lied to the show, to the audience, to me. The confrontation, sources say, was not a long one. There was no defense against the hard evidence. Caryn's justifications crumbled into desperate, tearful apologies, but the trust that had been the bedrock of their relationship had been pulverized. Matt was left in the ruins of his perfect future, living in a house with a woman he no longer knew. The professional fallout, according to our reports, was swift and decisive. The junior editor was fired immediately for gross ethical misconduct. A full internal review was launched by the network, and a new, much stricter protocol was put in place, severely limiting direct, unsupervised contact between cast and post-production staff. For Caryn, the consequences were more complicated. She was a main character in Matt's life and, by extension, the show. Sources claim there were intense discussions about removing her from the show entirely. While that didn't happen, her role was significantly altered. Her confessionals were more heavily scrutinized, and her on-screen presence, for a time, was visibly reduced. The narrative control she had so expertly wielded was stripped away. She was no longer a co-producer of her own story. She was just a cast member under a microscope. But the deepest impact was on the family itself. The carefully constructed image of a modern, blended family working through its issues was shattered. Matt was now isolated, caught in an impossible position. He was living with the woman who had betrayed him while simultaneously having to face the woman he had wronged by his own ignorance. The trust between Matt and Amy, already fragile, now had a new and profound chasm between them. Yet, ironically, for the first time in years, they shared a common, painful truth. Caryn became an outsider in her own home, her relationship with Matt now defined by a constant, unspoken tension that was all too real and needed no creative editing. For Amy, the reckoning was a painful vindication. The cloud of self-doubt and confusion that had followed her for years had finally lifted. She had been gaslit on a national stage, and now she was free. She could move forward with her life with Chris, confident in her own reality, her own memories. Her story was finally her own again, no longer subject to the manipulative cuts of a secret editor. And so, the carefully constructed world of Little People, Big World, as we knew it, comes crashing down behind the scenes. This theory, pieced together from but compelling insider reports, suggests that the family drama we've been watching was not entirely real, but a reality that was bent, twisted, and rewritten to serve a secret agenda. A producer's nightmare became Amy's validation and Matt's rude awakening. The show would go on, but the family dynamics, stripped bare of the manufactured narrative, would be forever changed. What do you think Matt should do now? Can trust that is broken to this degree ever be repaired? We want to hear your thoughts on this explosive theory. Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe in uncovering the truth behind the cameras, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring that bell so you never miss a deep dive into the stories that truly matter. Thank you for watching.